All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and those who are jumping in can join us as they enter. My name is Amanda Hawkins. I'm a grant specialist with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, and we welcome you to today's grantee orientation for the Negative Economic Impact Program. Also joining us today is our OPB Grants Division Director, Jen Wade, our OPB Grants Manager, Jonna West. We also have with us from RSM our auditing partners, Casey O'Rourke and Jessica Garris. So just a note to start with, as far as frequently asked questions, we're going to cover a lot of these today in this presentation, but we also want to point you towards our OPB website. We have multiple areas, multiple documents under the For Grantees section of our website, specifically our post-award FAQs, which are going to be linked, are linked here in this presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website afterwards, as will the slides. These FAQs are going to answer a lot of your questions throughout the onboarding process, the payment request process. So we encourage you to save this link and refer back to it throughout the time that you're working through this grant program. These FAQs include a lot of information on 2 CFR 200, payment requests, the reimbursement process, as well as environmental review where that is applicable. So this webinar is going to provide additional detailed information for you as far as compliance and reporting responsibilities under the State Fiscal Recovery Fund Program. This should be read in concert with your award terms and conditions, which many of you have already signed or are in the process of reviewing, as well as the final rule and other regulatory and statutory requirements. And listed here are some of those resources as well for you to refer back to. Also, just a reminder about your grant portal account. We want to make sure that anybody who is listed as a point of contact or an authorized user on the account is an actual employee or someone tied to the organization. So please, whenever you log into your grant portal account, just review those individuals who are listed in your points of contact and make sure that they are someone who should be accessing that information or communicating with our office in reference to this account. If you need any assistance in making those changes, whether it's removing someone, adding someone, or changing the primary point of contact, feel free to reach out to our office. And we do have some instructions as far as those changes would go throughout the presentation as well. So today's objectives in this webinar, number one, we want you to recognize your obligation as the awardee to comply with federal requirements and resources. We're going to identify the next steps in the award process, which most of you have already at least started. We're going to identify the key grant documents that you're going to be utilizing. We're going to help you become familiar with the available grant resources, and also assist you in understanding the resources for audit requirements. So just as an outline, we're going to do a general overview of the Negative Economic Impact Program. We're going to talk through the next steps of the award process. We're going to discuss reporting requirements, as well as audits. So to do a general overview of the Negative Economic Impact Program, the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds allow states to support industries that were particularly hard hit by the COVID-19 emergency and are starting to mend, helping them to address financial challenges. This program is going to aid in speeding the recovery of tourism, travel, hospitality sectors, as well as other industries. The specific expenditure dates for this program are going to be March 3rd, 2021 through October 31st of 2026. The intent of the NEI category is to address negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, including economic harm to workers, households, small businesses, impacted industries, as well as the public sector. Although state local fiscal recovery funds allows for a broad range of allowable uses, the award funding under this specific program through OPB must align to the allowable uses approved by OPB and agreed upon in your terms and conditions. Recipients of SFRF must use documented procurement procedures which conform to the applicable federal law and procurement standards covered in 2 CFR Part 200 with the noted sections, and procedures which echo applicable state and local law and regulations. So you will see multiple sections listed here. We want you to definitely review these sections in your own time, and we have on the next slides some very important ones highlighted and linked for you to review. And we definitely want you to pay close attention to Subpart D, post-federal award requirements, as well as Subpart F for audit requirements. Additional requirements can be placed on awards as outlined and executed in the terms and conditions agreement. So here's beginning the list of procurement standards as outlined in 2 CFR 200. And again, these will be available for you to review. So please, in your own time, review each of these so that you can understand exactly what's required of you as the grantee. Recipients are responsible for ensuring that any procurement using SLFRF funds or payments under procurement contracts using such funds are consistent with the procurement standards set forth in uniform guidance. These records will include, but are not necessarily limited to, those that are listed here. Rationale for the method of procurement, selection of contract type, contractor selection or rejection, and the basis for the contract price. Recipients must have and use documented procurement procedures that are consistent with the standards as outlined in 2 CFR 200.317 through 2 CFR 200.320. We have linked here the Treasury Reporting and Compliance Guide as well. This is a portion of our short guide to procurement, which outlines the multiple methods of procurement, including micro purchase, small purchase, and the different options for formal procurement with their pertaining information. Here are the links for the auditee information referenced in 2 CFR 200 with these pertaining sections. Again, we encourage you to review these in your downtime to make sure that you are familiar with what is required. A non-federal entity that expends $750,000 or more during the non-federal entity's fiscal year in federal awards must have a single or program-specific audit conducted for that year in accordance with the provisions of this part. Regarding subrecipients and contractors, an auditee may simultaneously be a recipient, subrecipient, and a contractor. Federal awards expended as a recipient or a subrecipient are subject to audit under this part. Note at the very bottom, in reference to contractors, in red at the bottom, the auditee is responsible for ensuring compliance for procurement transactions, which are structured such that the contractor is responsible for program compliance, or the contractor's records must be reviewed to determine program compliance. And the OPB short guide on procurement that I referenced earlier is linked here. All right, now we're going to talk about the onboarding process and the next steps for the NEI program. Again, many of you have already begun this process or have completed most of the steps and are just waiting information that you've requested. So here you see a screenshot of the awardee checklist, which is available in our For Grantees section of our website. If you click on each individual step, it's going to provide you with more information on that step and how to go about ensuring your compliance and making sure it is complete. We're going to talk through each of these steps. And I keep mentioning the For Grantees section of our website. I encourage you guys to go and bookmark that, because it's going to have a multitude of information that's going to be helpful to you all throughout this process, including documents, templates, other webinars and videos that are going to be helpful to you. Some of those are going to be linked here in this webinar, but it's going to, the website just in general is going to have a lot of information that's going to be helpful to you guys. So I encourage you to go and bookmark that. So the first step in our onboarding process is acquiring your UEI, or Unique Entity Identifier. You may have also heard us refer to this as your SAM number, because it's issued through sam.gov. So after you were announced as an awardee through the NEI program, we would have reached out to you and let you know that this is one of the first steps, if not the first step you need to take in starting that process, because there is a backlog that sam.gov is working through to fully register organizations and entities through their process. So once you start the registration process and submit your request, you should pretty much instantly receive your actual UEI, but it's not going to be considered fully registered until it goes through their entire process, which at this point, my understanding is it's taking multiple weeks because they do have a backlog. However, that initial UEI that you're provided by their office upon submitting your request is what you're going to utilize. So that's what you're going to use to sign terms and conditions, and you're also going to put that in your account info in the grant portal as well. Step number 2 is terms and conditions. So those were sent out, I believe, on June 2nd, and you do have 30 days to review those and sign them. If for some reason you have not received those, then I want you to email me directly, and we will make sure that those get to you as soon as possible, but they were sent out on June 2nd. They do come from the email address seen here in blue. It's adobesign@adobesign.com. It is not uncommon for these to go to a spam or trash folder of some sort. So if you have not seen that come through, go ahead and make sure you're checking that spam folder and make sure it's not there. There's also a user guide under the important documents section on the For Grantee website that will assist you as well. And for the terms and conditions, you may delegate those. We're going to walk through that on the next couple of slides. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like whenever you receive the terms and conditions. And at the very bottom, it has a warning that says, do not forward this. And it has a hyperlink on the word delegate. So if you click on the word delegate, it's going to take you to what we're going to see on the next screen, where you can fill in the appropriate information as far as who you want to delegate that to, and it will then be sent to that person. So it's very important that you don't just forward the email that you receive directly, that you walk through this process, because it messes up the flow, if you will, of the document. So if you will take these steps to delegate it appropriately, then everything will go very smooth. There's also a website, or excuse me, a video linked on our website on how to delegate terms and conditions that will walk you right through that process as well if you continue to have any questions. Next is the Georgia Grants portal access, which I believe all of you or most of you already have access to, but that is step number 3 in the process, is making sure that you sign up for access. You may also want to go ahead and add any other point of contact or authorized users to the account, and making sure that they have access as well if it's someone who's going to be submitting reimbursement requests or contacting our office and discussing anything about the grant with our office. Step 4 is vendor management. So we have a vendor management form, which we refer to as VMF, that's going to be submitted to our state accounting office, or SAO. If you're already a state vendor or supplier, you're going to fill out the vendor management form as shown here. Very specific instructions, and these instructions are on our website as well. You'll submit that to the email address listed, and it's also on the form. It's psvendor@sao.ga.gov. And then they will provide you with your vendor ID number and location, as well as our office. And that's what's going to set you up for receiving those ACH payments. If you need to register as a vendor or supplier, you're not already registered, then these are the instructions you're going to utilize. So you're going to fill out the vendor management form as well as a W-9 and submit that to the same SAO email address listed here. Next is final budget approval. So there's probably 2 or 3 of you guys who have already submitted your final budget to me, and it's in the review process. I greatly appreciate you guys getting that to me so quickly. For those of you who haven't done this step yet, listed or linked here is the link to the detailed budget worksheet, as well as the budget worksheet guide. So you're going to complete that and submit that to me via email. And then we will review that and approve it or request information as necessary. That is required for this program. And that is, you have to complete that before you can start the reimbursement request process. Final budgets should contain OPB State Fiscal Recovery Fund grant-related project costs only. Please do not include project costs that will be funded with fund sources outside of the ARPA, SFRF, and match funds should not be included in your final budget. Jen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just on the vendor management form, someone had asked in the chat if they would know when their vendor number has been approved, their vendor management form. That's a really good question, to go back to that one slide. And you will receive an email from our system when it's processed and added to your account. Just wanted to add that real quick.
Thank you so much. Budget revisions if necessary. Those reasons may include these things listed here: change in a key person specified in the application or award, disengagement from the project in general, costs that require prior approval, or transfer of funds budgeted for participant support costs to other categories of expense. There may also possibly be a change in scope. This is going to be something that's going to be a large change. So when the total objectives, aims, or purposes for, say, the service area change or elimination of a care delivery site, possibly the transfer of the performance of substantive programmatic work, or budget revisions that cause a project to change substantially from that which was approved by OPB. If you need to submit a budget revision, this is the method that you're going to utilize. And again, please note that additional items may be requested by the program specialist who's reviewing that budget revision request. Finally, we're on to payment requests. So these are going to be submitted through the Georgia Grants portal. So linked here, your main documentation is going to be the OPB payment template. And then any supporting documentation, and this supporting documentation is going to depend on what type of expense you're requesting reimbursement for. So when you click to download the template, it's going to have an instructions tab. Then it has a documentation guide tab, which very much details what kind of documentation you need to add with the template based on what you're requesting reimbursement for. Please make sure that you submit each request under the appropriate file type, and that'll make sense to you when you get into the portal and you start submitting these requests. It's basically the category that you're submitting it under and the category that you're filing each attachment under, each document that you're attaching. So the more accurately you attach those and upload those documents, the quicker we are going to be at reviewing it, and it won't have to be returned for revision to the grantee. Funds will be dispersed through the bank account listed on the vendor management form that you submitted to the state accounting office. If a change to that banking information that was initially provided is required, the grantee will work with OPB and the state accounting office to verify the new banking information before a payment can be made. Timing of payments depends upon correct banking information, the signing of terms and conditions, as well as providing complete required documentation. All returns for revisions notifications are going to be made through the portal. So if you submit a payment request through the portal, you'll be able to see the status of those after you've submitted it. And if you see that it's been returned for revision and you haven't seen an email or a message come through saying that, then it could have been missed. But that means it's been returned to you as the grantee for revision. And it could be for a variety of reasons, but that'll be noted in the email or note that comes back from us. Linked here is a very helpful video on how to submit a payment request. I encourage you guys to review this before submitting your first payment request. It will be very helpful. Budget categories are going to vary per project. Listed here are the main categories under this program: personnel, fringe, travel, equipment, which is over $5,000, and then supplies under $5,000, contracts, consultants, and subawards, and we do have an other category. Please remember that these categories and costs are going to align to your proposed application and the approved final budget. Here's another link to the payment request template, as well as a screenshot of one of the tabs. Again, there's many tabs on this template. Again, the first tab is the instructions. The second is the documentation guide, and then the summary page, which is what this is a screenshot of. And then the tabs thereafter are for each category of expenses. So as I referenced earlier, making sure that your point of contacts or authorized users are updated in the portal is going to be very helpful to you as well as to us. And there's two ways to make sure that those are up to date. So if you can log in and have access, you can make those changes yourself. And linked here is the portal user guide, and instructions on how to do this can be found on page 27. However, if for some reason you need assistance with this, or let's say you've had turnover and the people who were authorized users for your account no longer have access, you can utilize the authorized user designation survey, which is linked here, also available under the For Grantees section of our website, and complete the requested information. Please note that this option requires a signature from an authorized official on letterhead, and this is for protecting the organization. So just make sure that when you submit that request that memo is attached, or else we will not be able to process that request. If for some reason we do receive that request and that's not attached, we do try to reach out to you via email and let you know, hey, we received your request, but it did not have the required documentation attached. And we instruct you to go back and recomplete that with the attachment. Reporting information. So OPB will collect information from awardees as a part of their reporting requirement outlined by Treasury. And here we have linked the SLFRF Compliance and Reporting Guide. It has a lot of information. Again, I'm going to encourage you to review this and be familiar with what is required of you as the grantee. So expense category for this NEI program is going to be CFDA 21.027. Most of these resources have already been linked throughout the presentation, but here they are in one nice, neat little place for you. So again, these may be things that you want to pull up and bookmark, as they might be of assistance to you throughout the process. And now we're at the audits portion of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Casey and Jessica from RSM.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Sometimes I do have technical difficulties, but yes, I'm Jessica Garris. Casey, my colleague, is also going to be presenting. First, we wanted just to start off to talk about a little bit about who we are. You know, as Jen and Amanda mentioned, we were contracted as a third party, but a little bit about us. RSM is the largest audit, tax, and consulting firm to the middle market, and we pride ourselves in that. So we are very familiar with working and being collaborative with those that are being audited. And, you know, our role as it relates to this process is really monitoring the fraud and opportunities for negligence and non-compliance. So we're really just trying to make sure that all the boxes are checked so that OPB knows that the expenses were used appropriately in accordance with the codification. So really that's what our role is here. We'll be interacting with you and being very collaborative throughout the audit process. And we'll go through what that means. But as you go through submitting your budgets and then asking for payment requests, we are going to be in the tail end of that and auditing. So I think the takeaway that you're going to hear from us is going to be track everything, have a complete audit trail. When in doubt, save your documentation, because the more you provide us and you keep in the back end, it's just going to make our process and your involvement smooth, efficient, and it'll be easier to complete. So that's really what we want to accomplish today, to kind of get you thinking about the things you need to do as you are submitting the documentation that was previously discussed, in order to make the audit on the back end really smooth. So Casey, I'll let you talk about how they should be preparing.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I have a.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a little bit choppy. I don't know if.
Sometimes there echoes on here, but it's not muted. So if you would just mute if you're not talking, and let's see if that'll help.
Is this better?
It is.
Okay, perfect. So how to prepare. For the pre-award phase, complete the OPB detailed budget worksheet timely. and with the greatest level of detail available to you. Our team is going to review that. So the more detail on those budgets, the better. Completely identify underlying unit prices and quantities where available. Do not enter lump sum amounts without a corresponding justification or narrative. And then provide detailed descriptions and supporting schedules regarding how cost estimates were developed for construction, equipment, and contracts, consultants, or subawards. And then as we move on to the post-award, enact strong document management and retention controls for all project-related documentation, especially those related to commitments and expenditures. And then for high-value contractors and their subcontractors, ensure that they're aware of the fraud monitoring program and are responsive to requests for information. So there may be times that we would be reaching out to the contractors and subcontractors to possibly obtain more documentation or maybe a justification about an expense. And then, like Jessica said, our team is committed to working with you to develop reasonable response times for our information requests, and we will work hard to develop a seamless and efficient process. And then for the procurement overview for the grantee, uniform guidance for 2 CFR and local jurisdiction procurement policies. So it's very, very important to follow the uniform guidance from 2 CFR. For the grantee, we're going to be reviewing the full and open competition. If a sole source is used, justification is required, and that will also be reviewed. And then please make sure that a documented audit trail for all awards are present. And then prioritization of high safety and training standards, certification, licensure, local workers, workers from historically underserved communities, and high labor standards, equity, and domestic preference. Jessica, before I move on, did you want to add anything?
No, the only thing I would say is that's going to be a little bit different for these is that, you know, when you're submitting your payment requests and documentation, that's all going to be done through the portal, where you may want to grant us access to like a SharePoint. It's kind of similar how you would share documentation with external parties. So think about that. Think about the easiest way for you to grant us access to your documentation or share it with us outside of your system. So that is one thing that you guys need to be thinking about as you're combining all the documentation and retaining it, how easily accessible it'll be to us, because that will also expedite the audit process.
And then for the contractors, subcontractors, and supplier procurement, subcontracting plan must be included in the contractor bid to grantee. The contractor must have documented audit trail for selection and award of subcontractors and suppliers, policies and procedures for notifying grantee of new or modified subcontracts, obligations, and then federal pass-through requirements included in subcontracts, supplier purchase orders. And then an important takeaway from this is that contractors must have policies, procedures, and documented audit trail to ensure and evidence compliance with federal pass-through requirements. And we have listed some examples.
Yeah. Casey, one last thing to kind of go back to this is the message that we want to bring home to you guys is that we want to ensure that you have a strong internal control environment. So just think as you're going through and submitting all these payment requests and documentation, just go under the assumption that we would ask for everything. That way, when we do audit, our questions will be answered, again, just more efficiently, effective. I can't emphasize that enough. So when in doubt, save the documentation.
Thank you, Casey and Jessica.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to touch on a couple more FAQs. So one of the main questions we get is, when I log into the grant portal, my award isn't showing under my grants. When will I be able to see my award status? So you have to complete the onboarding process in order to see this information. So again, all the steps that we've already reviewed include obtaining your UEI, signing your terms and conditions, submitting your vendor management form in W-9 to state accounting office, and getting that vendor ID and vendor location, which is needed to complete the ACH payments, and then signing up for Georgia Grants access and getting your final budget approved. So once all those things have been done, you will be able to see all that information in the portal. So we have already discussed this. Am I required to submit a final budget for approval? Yes, for the negative economic impact program, it was a competitive award. So you must submit a final budget to OPB for approval. This has to be completed and approved before you can start submitting payment requests. How much detail should be provided in the final budget? Adequate details should be provided in the budget narrative to justify the expense under the approved award. When in doubt, provide the information. We need and we want as much information as we can get from you in a summarized perspective, so that we can fully understand exactly what your project entails and what these funds are being utilized for, so that we can approve it. How do I track my payment request? So in the grants portal, when you submit a payment request, you're going to start seeing a status update each time it moves through one of the levels. So there's draft, which means it hasn't been submitted yet. Once you actually submit it, it will be listed as submitted. We have a two-level review process. So when it says review in progress, that means our level 1 review team is reviewing it. Decision in progress means that it has been approved by the level 1 reviewer and it's being approved by, or it's in the review process for level 2. Approved is that it has been approved by the level 2 review team. Payment in progress means request is in progress for payment. Payment complete, payment has been completed. Return for revision, OPB has returned this request back to the subrecipient for revision. And rejected, which of course means that the payment request has been rejected. So you'll see these status updates and you'll be able to track where it is in the grants portal. How long does the approval process take for payment requests? It all depends on the detail included in the supporting documentation that's attached to the payment request. Any payment requests that are submitted with adequate documentation and justification, we do not anticipate the process taking longer than 30 days. Are NEPA requirements applicable to state fiscal recovery funds? While they are not applicable to ARPA state fiscal recovery funds, the State Environmental Review Process, or SERP, under the Environmental Protection Division does apply. More information can be found on this first link here if needed. Projects that do need to submit a project for historic preservation review can contact Department of Community Affairs. And please note, it is the responsibility of the subrecipient to consult with the appropriate state office with regards to projects that can impact any necessary environmental review or historic preservation. All right, I have listed here our contact information. So many of you have been in touch with me, but here's my email address, amanda.hawkins@opb.georgia.gov. We also have our general grants inbox that you can reach out to for general grant inquiries, the vendor management email address, and then the Georgia Grants at RSMUS. to reach out to RSM. And then I'm going to see if Jen or Jonna have anything else to add before we start taking some questions.
I was just going to reiterate some of the questions we did have in the chat because they're really good questions, and I think almost all of them can be found answered in our post-award FAQs. We do realize there is a pretty significant backlog in the UEIs, and unfortunately, we have no control over that since it is managed by the feds. We have, reached out to them several times to let them know this has become an issue with us, but it's an issue in every single state. So we are kind of commiserating together with the other states, and again, we are kind of checking with them as often as we can to see what that backlog is looking like. We know it's frustrating. We have, because of that, accommodated the terms and conditions signing to, you have until 12/1/2022 to get that in. So that's 6 months. So if you have not put it in for your UEI today, do that, because again, by 12/1/2022, then those will expire if you have not done that yet. There is information too about when you can submit at the latest your budget, and it's based on the signing of your terms and conditions. But your terms and conditions does have a deadline. They do have a deadline as well. So that's one of them. I mentioned the vendor management form. I'm just scrolling through real quick just to make sure I hit these. Someone said they had an incorrect, their name was incorrect, and that was the delay. I have heard that those things are getting facilitated quicker than the actual entity registration, so you may get that back quicker. I would just keep bugging them. When in doubt, bug them. How long does it take to receive reimbursements once we submitted for a payment request? And so that's the biggest thing everybody's asking. So when we get our money, it really just depends on everything that Amanda just kind of went through and the amount of detail you put in there, making sure everything is correct. That cuts down the time we have to reach back out and we do a return to revision with you guys. So if everything is submitted perfectly and we approved, we generally tell people not longer than 2 weeks, only because it depends on if it's a bank holiday. You can generally expect to see that within 5 to 7 business days because it's an ACH transfer. I'm gonna keep scrolling for a second. Can you finish your project earlier? So I mean, as Amanda outlined, so ARPA allows us to go back to March 3rd, 2021. Some of you put in applications that had those dates in there. Some of you did not. So it's either forward looking from the time of your award till whenever you put in there. So if you put in, if your project was just 1 year, of course, yes, you can finish within that year. If you get to 2024 and it's taking a little bit longer, then you put in your application, you have up until that 2026 deadline that Amanda put in that first slide. I believe October, was it 31st, Amanda? Perfect, thank you. Let's see. So funds are not in advance, as we have published on our website. It's been this way since last May. These are on a reimbursement basis. And so that's also in our post FAQs. If you go back to the Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund application page, these were announced as reimbursement only grants. And so we do not do the advancements. So again, those can be found in the post award FAQs. Someone asked about single audits. I put the information there so you could take a look. But non-federal entities that spend more than $750,000 or $750 or more of federal funds are required to have a single audit. And what are the audit requirements for those under? So that is not a single audit. So what RSM is referring to, so when we say audits, so they are essentially going to be performing our subrecipient monitoring plan, which includes audits. So those of you that are used to federal funding, you're used to desk reviews, people coming in just randomly checking through, your receipts and things like that. Those are the types of audits that we were talking about. So not the same as the single audit, right? Which they will be taking a look at as a part of their audits. But when RSM comes in, think of them as our subrecipient monitoring auditors in a sense. If the procurement raises the cost of the project from the amount in the application quote, can we increase the budget? Overall, we cannot provide any additional funding. So tranche 1 is done. It has been awarded. So we cannot increase your budget if your costs have increased since then. However, if you received a quote and it's past 30 days and it goes up, right? We're all in massive inflation. Costs are going up like crazy. We're seeing this across the board. Then you can certainly, if it's over 10% of that particular line item, we'll have a mechanism for that budget amendment process that Amanda was talking about. We are actually in the process right now of getting that in our portal so that it's not this manual process with spreadsheets. As of right now, that's how we will roll it out and take those in. And then hopefully within the next 30 days, 60 days, we'll be solely in the portal with those. So you can request a budget amendment and move some funding around if you need to, you know, put something in a different category than you had initially planned on. Hopefully that answers that question. Did you say the deadline for final budget submission is in the TNC? It is not. It's in that post-award FAQ that I put up. I can put it in one more time. It's right here. And I'll post the link again. The link I'm posting right now is to the post-award FAQs. That gives you your deadlines, what to expect with payment requests, how to submit a payment request, etc., and what all you'll need. For multi-year projects, if annual budgeted funds are not fully expended, will the remaining balance roll over to the next project year? So yes, so from here forward, you can basically, when you put in your budget request with Amanda, we actually changed our budget form to allow you to put in just a total lump sum for all of your years. So when RSM validates that budget, for example, if you have a 3-year project, we're not collecting that in a 3-year form anymore. You'll just put everything in there. That will cut down dramatically on your need to put in a budget amendment. So that will just stay in that category until you expend it or you do an amendment to move that. And I'm sorry, guys, I would go on camera, but my camera is not working. Any other questions? So again, as Amanda stated, we have a really amazing website, the 4 Grantees webpage, tons of videos. We went through a lot of work to kind of put those up there for you guys. We know some people like to read, some people like to watch. So we've done a good job of putting both up there for you all to have a lot of information. The payment request walks you through step by step, what you will need to put in, what will get it kicked back, etc. But if you've got any questions, obviously Amanda and Casey can help with anything that you have.
And many of you, like I've already said, have been in touch with me via email throughout the onboarding process already. If you have questions or can't find something on the website that you know is there, whatever it may be, feel free to reach out to me via email and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. That's what we're here for.
And just to add, a lot of people joined the call after Amanda got started, but this will be posted on our website, the full recorded webinar, as well as her slide deck. So you'll be able to access that on our 4 Grantees website.
We got someone in the chat saying, thank you, Amanda. Great job.
All right, any other questions? Going once, going twice? Oh, yay. Well, hopefully you guys continue to refer back to this. If you have any questions, refer back to the website. Again, I'm here for you to reach out to anytime you need some assistance, and I greatly look forward to working with all of you throughout this process. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great afternoon.